The sheriff's knock came at 9:07 p.m., in the middle of a thunderstorm that rattled my windows and shook my bones. And in that instant, I knew, deep in the pit of my stomach, that my life was about to split clean in two. My name is Erin Mitchell, and before I tell you what was on the other side of that door, you need to understand one thing. Sometimes, the people you'd give your last breath for will choose a vacation over your child's funeral. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about betrayal wearing the face of family, and the moment I decided I'd never let them hurt me again. The sheriff's knock came at 9:07 p.m., right in the middle of a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the old wooden floor creak under my feet. Lightning flashed across Maple Falls, and for a split second, the whole living room lit up like a camera flash, just long enough for me to see the worry etched across Sheriff Danielle's face through the glass. I opened the door, my heart already racing. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat, pooling onto my welcome mat. His deputy, a younger man I didn't know, stood just behind him, avoiding my eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell," his voice was low, deliberate, and heavy with something I didn't want to hear. "There's been an accident." The words hit like a punch to the chest. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself as my mind began to spin. "Tom?" I asked, my voice already trembling. "Jake?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Your husband was pronounced dead at the scene. Your son, he's alive, but in critical condition at Canyon Creek Hospital." Somewhere outside, thunder cracked so loud it shook the glass in the windows, but all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. My knees nearly buckled. One hand gripped the frame of the door, the other covered my mouth as if I could somehow hold in the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. I don't remember locking the door, or grabbing my coat, or following them to the cruiser. All I remember is the rain hitting the windshield in sheets, the red and blue lights flashing against the wet pavement, and the single thought pounding in my head, "Please, God, don't take my boy too." The drive to Canyon Creek Hospital felt like it took both seconds and hours. The sheriff said things, details about the accident, the location, the time, but the words slid right past me. All I could see in my mind was Jake's smile, that gap between his front teeth, the way he'd shouted, "See you later, Mom," as he and Tom headed for the lake that morning. When we arrived, the fluorescent lights of the ER felt harsh, almost cruel. A nurse rushed me through a maze of corridors until we stopped at a room buzzing with machines. And there he was, my boy, lying so still, his face swollen, his head wrapped in layers of white bandages. Tubes and wires snaked from his small body, each beep and hiss pulling me further into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Dr. Harris stepped in, his expression grave. "We relieved the pressure on his brain, but it's touch and go. The next 48 hours will be critical." I nodded, because what else could I do? My hands were gripping the rail of Jake's bed so tightly my knuckles burned. I whispered to him, telling him I was here, that I wasn't going anywhere, that his dad would want him to fight. I don't know if he could hear me, but I needed to believe he could. Around midnight, I stepped out into the hallway and called my parents. Mom answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "It's Erin," I said automatically, too tired to correct her slip. "Tom's gone. Jake's in a coma." There was a pause. Then a sigh. "Oh, Erin, we'll come by tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. Not now. Not when I was standing alone in a hospital hallway, shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I told myself it was shock, or age, or the late hour. I told myself they'd be there for me when it mattered. I had no idea that this, right here, was the first crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew about family. By the time my parents arrived the next morning, I'd been awake for nearly 30 hours. They walked into Jake's hospital room carrying paper coffee cups, wearing the kind of polite, practiced sympathy you give to a stranger at a funeral. Dad gave me a quick hug, just enough to check the box. Mom patted my shoulder like she was dusting off a jacket. They asked a few questions about Jake's condition, nodded solemnly at my answers, and after exactly 47 minutes, Mom glanced at her watch. "We should get going," she said. We promised Lauren we'd help her and Ben move some equipment into the cafe today. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. You're leaving? Jake's in a coma. We know, honey. But we told Lauren we'd be there. She's expanding her business, it's a big day for her. Lauren Carter. My little sister. 3 years younger, sharper tongue, and an uncanny ability to make every crisis about herself. She'd been in and out of jobs for years until she married Ben, a man whose charm could sell ice to Alaskans but whose business sense was questionable. They were barely scraping by when Tom and I offered them our downtown loft rent-free. Because that's what family does, right? We help each other. Or at least, that's what I believed back then. When Mom and Dad left the hospital, I sat there holding Jake's hand, trying to tell myself this was temporary, that they'd come around when they saw how bad things were. But somewhere deep inside, a cold little voice whispered that maybe I wasn't their priority. Not anymore. And in the days that followed, that voice only got louder. The first week in the hospital bled into the second, then the third. My life shrank to a loop: wake up on the vinyl couch in Jake's room, wash my face in the family restroom, grab a coffee from the vending machine, and sit by his side reading whatever book was within reach. The doctors said coma patients could sometimes hear familiar voices, so I read to him every day: Harry Potter, baseball stats from the local paper, even his math homework. I told him about the neighbor's new puppy, about the first snow dusting over Maple Falls, about how his dad would be proud of him for fighting so hard. Not once did he squeeze my hand back. My parents visited exactly twice in those first 2 months. Each time, they stayed less than 20 minutes. The smell of antiseptic made Mom nauseous. Dad's arthritis flared up in the stiff hospital chairs. Lauren never came. She texted me once to say she was too busy with the cafe but was sending prayers. Meanwhile, bills were piling up. I'd taken unpaid leave from school, drained the savings Tom and I had set aside for a family trip we'd never take. The loft downtown was still rent-free for Lauren and Ben. I didn't think twice about it, after all, they were family. But one night, after a particularly brutal meeting with Dr. Harris about Jake's stalled progress, I scrolled through Facebook to distract myself. Lauren's page was full of smiling photos, her and Ben holding wine glasses at a local festival, posing in front of their new espresso machine, laughing under the warm cafe lights. The contrast was like ice water down my spine. I was sitting under flickering fluorescent bulbs, listening to my son's breathing machine, while my family's lives carried on untouched. That was the night I stopped waiting for them to show up for me. It was a gray Tuesday morning in late May when Dr. Harris called me at the hospital. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Erin, I need you to come in right away." I was already halfway there when I realized I hadn't asked why. Deep down, I knew. When I stepped into the hallway outside Jake's room, Dr. Harris didn't have to say a word. I could read it in his eyes. Still, he said it. "I'm so sorry. Jake passed away about an hour ago. His body just couldn't fight anymore." The words knocked the air out of me. I stumbled back against the wall, my palms pressed flat against the cold paint. I'd spent 6 months holding on to hope like a lifeline, and in one sentence, it was gone. I sat beside him for a long time, brushing my hand over his hair, memorizing every line of his face. He looked peaceful, like he was only sleeping, and any second he'd wake up and ask what was for dinner. But that moment never came. When I finally drove home, the silence in the house was deafening. I stared at the phone for nearly an hour before calling my parents. Mom answered on the second ring. "Jake died today," I managed to say. There was a pause, then her voice, flat, almost businesslike. "Oh, Erin. I'm sorry to hear that. I need help with the funeral arrangements. I can't do this alone again." Another pause. Then, "Well, that's going to be a problem. We're flying to Hawaii tomorrow with Lauren and Ben. 10 days. It's been planned for months." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Cancel it." "Absolutely not. We spent $10,000. The tickets are non-refundable. You'll manage, you're strong. I didn't even have time to process before Lauren called. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. Look, I'm sorry about Jake, but this is your problem, not mine. I'm pregnant. This might be my last chance to relax before the baby comes, and I'm not giving it up because of this. Because of this. I stood there in my kitchen, the receiver cold against my ear, realizing something I'd been too stubborn to see. My son had been gone less than 24 hours, and my family had already chosen a vacation over his funeral. And that was the moment something inside me broke, then hardened. The morning after that phone call, I woke up with eyes so swollen it hurt to blink. But under the exhaustion and the grief, there was something else, clarity. I'd spent my whole life believing that family meant sacrifice, trust, and showing up when it mattered. But my family had shown me, in the most brutal way possible, that to them, family meant whatever was convenient. So I decided to stop playing the part they expected of me. The first step was Jake's funeral. I called my friend Megan, a fellow teacher who had been dropping off casseroles for months, and asked for her help. Together, we planned every detail, the flowers, the music, the readings. We held the service on a Thursday morning. It was small. Quiet. Beautiful. Megan stood beside me the whole time. Tom's old fishing buddy read a passage from the Bible. Jake's coach placed his little league cap on the casket before they lowered it into the ground. And just like I knew they would, my parents and Lauren didn't show. The day after the funeral, I drove straight to the downtown loft where Lauren and Ben had been living rent-free for over 2 years. I had the key. It was my property. I opened the door to find coffee mugs in the sink, laundry half done, their life scattered everywhere like they owned the place. I didn't say a word. I just started packing. Clothes into trash bags. Kitchenware into boxes. That ridiculous neon sign from the cafe into bubble wrap. 3 hours later, everything they owned was piled in the middle of the living room floor of my parents' house. I paid the movers in cash and left before anyone could ask questions. Then I called a locksmith. By dinner time, the loft had brand new locks. Next came the bills. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, opening one account after another. My parents' car insurance, cancelled. Their cable package, cancelled. Lauren's phone bill, car payment, and gym membership, cancelled. With every click, I remembered why I'd started paying for these things, because they needed me. Because I wanted to help. But sitting there, watching the cancellations roll in, I realized something life-changing: they didn't need me. They'd never needed me. They just needed what I could give them. And from that moment on, I wasn't giving them another cent. They came back from Hawaii on a Sunday night, all sunburned and smiling in the photos they'd been posting all week. By Monday evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing, calls from Mom, from Dad, from Lauren, from Ben. I didn't answer a single one. Around 9 p.m., headlights swept across my living room walls. Car doors slammed. Then came the pounding on my front door. Erin. Open this door right now. Lauren's voice was shrill, cutting through the night air. I took my time walking to the door, every step steady. When I opened it, they were all there, Lauren in a flowy beach dress, Ben shifting uncomfortably behind her, Mom and Dad looking more irritated than concerned. We need to talk, Mom said, brushing past me into the house without waiting for permission. The rest followed. Lauren crossed her arms. What the hell did you think you were doing? All our stuff is dumped at Mom and Dad's like garbage, and we can't even get into the loft. That's because it's not your loft, I said calmly. It's mine. And you're no longer welcome there. Her jaw dropped. You can't just evict us. We have rights. No, Lauren. You had a favor. And that favor ended when you told me my son's death was my problem, not yours. The room went silent. Even Ben looked at her like he didn't recognize the words. Lauren's voice wavered. I was upset. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. Mom stepped forward, trying to smooth things over. Erin, you're upset. This isn't how family treats each other. I almost laughed. Family? You think leaving me to bury my husband and son alone while you sip cocktails on a beach is how family treats each other? Lauren's face twisted into something ugly. This is about jealousy. You can't stand that I'm having a baby and you're not. You're punishing me because I'm happy and you're not. Something inside me went ice cold. Get out, I said, my voice low but sharp. No one moved. Get out. This time, they listened. One by one, they filed out, Lauren muttering under her breath, Mom looking back like she might say something, but didn't. When the door clicked shut behind them, I locked it and stood there in the quiet, realizing I felt lighter than I had in years. 2 days later, I woke up to a dozen text messages from friends. Have you seen Lauren's post? I opened Facebook and there it was, a long, self-pitying rant. Lauren had written that I'd lost my mind since Jake's death, that I'd kicked a pregnant woman out of her home, and that I'd cut off our elderly parents financially, leaving them to struggle. The comment section was already filling with outrage on her behalf. I didn't respond. Not yet. As the day went on, more comments appeared, but they weren't all in her favor. Mrs. Callahan, the neighbor who'd brought soup the night Tom died, wrote, "Weren't you in Hawaii during Jake's funeral?" Then Coach Miller, "Jake was my player. I didn't see you at the service." Mrs. Davies, Jake's teacher, chimed in, "He was your nephew. You weren't there." The tide shifted fast. People started connecting the dots, my family's vacation photos overlapping with the date of Jake's burial, the empty chairs they'd left behind. By evening, the post had turned into a battlefield. Friends of mine, neighbors, even people from church, were calling her out. Screenshots of their beach trip were being shared alongside the funeral program. That's when I posted my only comment. Lauren, you're right, our family relationships are damaged. They were damaged when you, Ben, Mom, and Dad chose to go on vacation instead of attending my 11-year-old son's funeral. You told me his death was my problem, not yours. I hope Hawaii was worth it. I didn't need to say more. The silence after that was deafening. Within hours, her post was deleted, but it was too late. The screenshots were everywhere. And for the first time in months, I felt the balance shift. Not in my favor, exactly, but away from theirs. After the Facebook fallout, the calls and texts from my family came in waves, first angry, then pleading, then silent. I didn't answer a single one. Every number they used, I blocked. Every email they sent went straight to trash. I wasn't interested in fighting anymore. I was interested in disappearing from their reach. I rented out the downtown loft to a young couple who signed a year-long lease and paid market rate. The first rent check felt like closing a chapter one should have ended years ago. Next, I handed in my resignation at the elementary school. My principal looked shocked, but she didn't try to talk me out of it. She'd seen me hollowed out these past months, running on fumes. With the insurance payout from Tom's policy and the loft income, I didn't have to worry about money. For the first time in my adult life, I had the freedom to decide exactly where I wanted to be, and who I wanted to be there with. And I knew exactly where I was going. Tom and I had always dreamed of traveling, seeing the red cliffs of Utah, the northern lights in Alaska, the cobblestone streets of Europe. We kept putting it off for someday. Someday was here. As I packed my suitcase, I realized I wasn't just leaving Maple Falls. I was leaving behind the version of myself that believed loyalty was unconditional. Because it isn't. Not when it's one-sided. Not when the people you call family can stand on a beach halfway across the world while you bury your child. My first stop was Montana. The air was so crisp it almost hurt to breathe, and the mountains rose up like something out of a painting. I rented a tiny cabin near Glacier National Park, the kind of place where the nights are so quiet you can hear the wind moving through the pines. Every morning, I hiked alone. No phone calls. No obligations. Just the sound of my boots on the trail and the steady rhythm of my own breath. At first, I thought too much, about Jake's laugh, about Tom's fishing trips, about the last words my sister had ever said to me. But somewhere between the third and fourth trail, the noise in my head began to fade. From Montana, I drove west to Oregon's coast, where the ocean smashed against jagged rocks and the sunsets bled gold into the horizon. I let the salt air sting my cheeks, standing there for hours with my hands stuffed in my pockets, thinking about how small we all are compared to the sea. I sent postcards to no one. I posted nothing online. My life had become mine again, and I wasn't going to hand it back to the people who'd proven they didn't deserve it. By the time I booked a flight to Alaska, I realized something unexpected. Grief hadn't left me, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a crushing weight. It was a quiet companion, walking beside me as I put one foot in front of the other. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. By the time I left Alaska, I'd been on the road for almost 4 months. I'd stood under skies lit with green fire, driven roads that seemed to stretch into forever, and met strangers who showed me more kindness in a day than my own family had in years. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just running from Maple Falls, I was running towards something else. Colorado had always been in the back of my mind. Tom and I used to talk about moving there someday, starting fresh in the mountains. We loved the idea of crisp winters, summers filled with hiking trails, and neighbors who waved from their porches. So when I saw a little house for sale on the outskirts of a small town near Estes Park, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy. But it had a porch with a view of the Rockies and a garden that caught the afternoon sun. I signed the papers the same week I saw it. Standing in the empty living room, I thought about all the places I'd been these past months. None of them felt like home. But this did. I knew my family would eventually find out where I'd gone. Maybe they'd call, maybe they'd even show up. But I also knew something else: whatever door they knocked on, it wouldn't be one I'd open. 6 months later, I sat on my porch in Colorado, a mug of coffee warming my hands as the morning sun spilled over the mountains. The air smelled like pine and possibility. I thought about the family I used to believe in, the one I would have walked through fire for. And then I thought about the truth: that family had never really existed. What I'd had was a fragile illusion, built on the hope that blood alone was enough to bind people together. It isn't. Family is the neighbor who brings you soup when you're sick. It's the friend who answers the phone at 2 a.m. It's the stranger on a hiking trail who offers you water and a smile without expecting anything in return. I used to think cutting people out of your life was cruel. Now I understand, it's an act of self-preservation. You cannot build a peaceful life while keeping the door open to those who've proven they'll burn it down. Sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones that free you. And sometimes, the clearest view of who truly belongs in your life comes when you stop chasing the ones who keep walking away. I miss Tom every day. I miss Jake every hour. But I don't miss the people who chose a beach over my son's funeral. Because I've finally learned, the real family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up. And I'll spend the rest of my life choosing them, just as they choose me.
If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever had to heal without an apology? And what gave you the strength to keep going anyway? Speech balloon, you never know. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Bell, like, subscribe, and share if you believe in turning pain into power. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning.